His scent was the first thing I noticed, still lingering on the pillows, a mix of sandalwood and the faint, musky smell of his skin after we'd made love. I smiled, burrowing my face deeper into the linen, my body still humming with a pleasant ache. I could still feel the ghost of his hands on my hips, the rough scrape of his 5 o'clock shadow against the sensitive skin of my inner thigh, and the low, husky way he'd whispered my name into my neck like it was a prayer, a promise. Last night had been different, a wild, desperate kind of passion, fueled by his whispers of forever. We'd been careless, consumed by a fire that burned away all thought, leaving only sensation in its wake. So when I reached for him in the hazy morning light, expecting to pull his warm, solid body against mine, the icy shock of the empty space beside me was a physical blow. The sheets weren't just cool, they were cold. A deep, settled cold that spoke of hours of vacancy. My eyes snapped open, my breath hitched, my heart started a frantic, clumsy drum solo against my ribs. On the nightstand, next to a half-empty glass of water, lay the reason for the symphony of terror conducting itself in my chest. A single plastic stick with 2 screamingly pink lines. Pregnant. I was pregnant, and David was gone. I stumbled out of bed, the floorboards cold against my bare feet. "David?" I called out, my voice a pathetic, reedy thing. The sound was swallowed whole by the apartment. I drifted like a ghost through the small space we had so lovingly called our own just yesterday. The living room was neat, too neat. The worn leather jacket he always slung over the back of the dining chair was gone. The keys he always tossed into the ceramic bowl by the door were missing. A tidal wave of nausea, sharp and acidic, rose in my throat, and this had nothing to do with morning sickness. My legs carried me to his closet, my hand hesitating on the wooden door before I pulled it open. Empty. It was cavernous. A hollowed-out carcass. Every shirt, every pair of jeans, his single suit, the shoes he meticulously polished every Sunday night, gone. All that remained was a single forgotten black sock lying balled up in the corner like a dead spider. My vision tunneled. The walls of the hallway seemed to bend inward. I sank to my knees, the rough fibers of the hallway runner digging into my skin. My hand flew to my mouth to stifle a sob that felt like it was tearing its way up from my soul. He hadn't just left. He had erased himself. It was a surgical removal, clean and absolute. He had packed up his life and excised himself from mine, leaving behind nothing but a ghost and a positive pregnancy test. And in that moment, staring at that empty closet, the weight of those 2 pink lines didn't feel like a new beginning. They felt like an anchor, dragging me down into the cold, silent deep. But how did I get here? How did a love that felt like a supernova collapse into a black hole in the space of a single night? To understand this wreckage, this utter devastation, you have to go back to the beginning. You have to understand the man I thought I knew. It all started 3 months ago, on a Tuesday that was so unredavidable I almost stayed home. My older sister Leah had bailed on our weekly sister dinner for a last-minute work thing, and I was feeling the familiar Sunday evening on a Tuesday night blues. I forced myself out of my apartment and went to a little indie bookstore downtown that smelled of old paper and roasted coffee beans. I was browsing the poetry section, running my fingers over the spines of books I'd probably never buy, when a voice next to me, smooth and deep like aged whiskey, said, "Bukowski, a woman of taste or a woman in pain?" I turned, a retort ready on my lips, but it died the second I saw him. He was tall, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners and a smile that seemed to be hiding a charming secret. He had a light scruff on his jaw that looked deliberate and effortless at the same time. He was, in a word, beautiful. Maybe a little of both, I managed, my voice sounding breathier than I intended. He chuckled, a warm, genuine sound. "I'm David," he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm and warm. "Chloe," I replied. "Well, Chloe, if you're a fan of honest pain, you should try the Russian novelists. They make Bukowski look like a greeting card. We talked for nearly 2 hours, standing right there between the poets and the playwrights. He was a financial analyst, he said, but his passion was literature. He spoke about Dostoevsky and Hemingway with a fire in his eyes that was utterly intoxicating. He wasn't just smart, he was passionate. He asked me about my work as a graphic designer, and he didn't just listen, he heard me. He asked follow-up questions, his gaze so intense it felt like he was seeing straight into my soul. It was dizzying, disarming. He walked me to the door, and, under the warm glow of the streetlights, he hesitated for a moment. "I know this is forward," he said, running a hand through his dark hair, "but I feel like I'd be a complete idiot if I didn't ask for your number." My heart did a little flip. I gave it to him, and he texted me before I had even reached my car. "David, I'm already regretting not kissing you goodnight." I smiled like an idiot the entire drive home. That night, I told Leah all about him. She was, as always, cautiously optimistic, which is her version of outright skepticism. "He sounds perfect, Chloe," she said over the phone. "A little too perfect. Handsome, smart, reads classic literature and has a good job? What's the catch? Is he a serial killer?" "Stop it," I laughed. "He's just nice." "No one is just nice. Be careful. Your heart's been through the ringer." She was right. My last boyfriend, a musician named Alex, had treated my heart like a rented instrument, playing it until he got bored and then leaving it in a pawn shop. I had built my walls high and strong after that. But David? David arrived with a bulldozer. Our first date was 2 days later. He took me to a tiny Italian restaurant I'd never heard of, tucked away on a side street. The owner knew him by name. He ordered for both of us in fluent Italian, which should have been arrogant, but somehow came off as incredibly sexy. "My grandmother was from Sicily," he explained with a shrug. "It was either learn the language or never get fed." The conversation flowed as easily as the wine. We didn't talk about the weather or our jobs. We talked about our dreams, our fears, the scars we carried that no one else could see. He told me about losing his father to cancer when he was a teenager, how it made him determined to live life without regrets. He had a way of making you feel safe, of making you want to hand over the keys to your most secret, locked-up rooms. I told him about Alex, about how I felt like I had lost a part of myself in that relationship. He reached across the table and took my hand. His thumb stroked the back of it gently. "His loss, Chloe," he said, his eyes locking with mine. "Anyone who would let you go is a fool." Later that night, he walked me to my apartment door. The air was charged with a tension so thick I could taste it. He leaned in slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away, but I was rooted to the spot. His lips were soft, tentative at first, then deepened into a kiss that sent a jolt of electricity straight to my core. It wasn't rushed or needy. It was a kiss of discovery, a promise. When he pulled away, he rested his forehead against mine. "I'm going to fall for you, Chloe," he whispered, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't quite name. "I think I already am." I should have been terrified. Leah's voice of caution should have been screaming in my ear, but all I felt was a profound sense of coming home. The next few weeks were a blur of intoxicating bliss. It was a whirlwind romance in every sense of the word. He showered me with affection, not just in grand gestures, but in small, intimate ways that meant so much more. He'd leave a single flower on my pillow in the morning. He'd text me in the middle of the day just to say he was thinking about the way I laughed. He learned how I took my coffee, that I hated pickles, that I had an irrational fear of ladybugs. Our physical connection was just as intense. He was a considerate and passionate lover, focused entirely on my pleasure. He made me feel beautiful and desired in a way I had never experienced. He'd spend hours just exploring my body, kissing every scar, every stretch, David, whispering how perfect I was. It was more than just sex. It was a form of worship. In his arms, my insecurities melted away. I felt seen. I felt cherished. About a month in, he said it. We were lying in bed, tangled in my sheets after a lazy Sunday afternoon of making love. The sun was streaming through the blinds, painting golden stripes across his bare back. He was tracing patterns on my arm, his touch sending shivers down my spine. "I love you, Chloe," he said softly, his voice barely a whisper against my skin. My heart stopped. Alex had taken a year to mumble those words, and even then they'd sounded like an obligation. David said them like they were the most obvious truth in the world. "I love you too," I whispered back, and the words felt truer than anything I had ever said. He lifted his head, his eyes searching mine. "Really?" "Really," I said, a tear slipping from the corner of my eye. He gently wiped it away with his thumb. "I want to be with you," he said, his voice firm, resolute. "I want to build a life with you. I want it all." When I told Leah, her response was predictable. "A month, Chloe? He told you he loves you after 1 month?" "When you know, I argued, parroting a line he had used on me. "That's what people say in movies. In real life, that's a red flag the size of Texas. It's called love bombing." "You don't know him," I snapped, an unfamiliar anger flaring up. "You're just cynical because you've never had a man treat you right." The words were out before I could stop them, and I hated myself instantly. The hurt in her eyes was a physical blow. "That was low, Chloe," she said quietly. "I'm sorry," I mumbled. I didn't mean it, but a part of me did. I felt like I had discovered this magical Technicolor world, and Leah was trying to tell me it was all just black and white. I didn't want to hear it. I wanted to believe in the fairy tale. The first crack in the perfect facade appeared a few weeks later. We were planning a weekend trip to a little bed and breakfast by the coast. We were both excited. Then, on Thursday night, his phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID, and his face instantly changed. The warm, open expression was replaced by a guarded, tense mask. He walked into the other room to take the call. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but his voice was low and clipped. He came back a few minutes later looking pale. "I'm so sorry, baby," he said, avoiding my eyes. "I have to cancel this weekend. It's a family emergency." "Oh my God, is everything okay?" I asked, my heart clenching with concern for him. "Your grandmother?" He hesitated for a fraction of a second too long. "No, not her. It's my cousin. He's been in an accident. I have to fly out to Chicago." "Of course," I said, rushing to hug him. "Don't even worry about it. Is there anything I can do?" "No," he said quickly, almost too quickly. "I'll handle it. I'll call you as soon as I land." He packed a small overnight bag in minutes and was gone. The apartment felt cold and empty without him. He called me that night, his voice strained. He said his cousin was stable, but it was serious. The details were vague. When I pressed for more, he got defensive. "Chloe, I don't really want to talk about it. It's a mess. I just need to be here for my family." He was gone for 3 days. His texts were sporadic, his calls brief. I felt a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. It wasn't just concern, it was a sliver of doubt. Leah's warnings echoed in my head. When he came back, he was exhausted, but he swept me up in a huge hug and kissed me until I was breathless. He brought me a beautiful scarf from a boutique in Chicago and spent the entire night telling me how much he had missed me, how thinking of me was the only thing that got him through the ordeal. He expertly deflected any further questions about his cousin, and I, so desperate for things to go back to our perfect normal, let him. I buried my doubts under the weight of his affection. 2 weeks after that, the unthinkable happened. It was that night, the wild, passionate, desperate night that now felt like a scene from a different life. We were usually so careful. He was meticulous about protection. But that night, in the heat of the moment, with his whispers of forever in my ear, we were reckless. We both realized it at the same time afterwards, our breath still coming in ragged gasps. "Oh God," I whispered, a jolt of panic shooting through me. He pulled me closer, kissing my forehead. Hey, he said softly. Don't worry, it'll be okay. Whatever happens, we're in it together. Right? Right, I said, my voice small. I mean it, Chloe, he said, turning my face to look at him. His eyes were deadly serious. If you were pregnant, I wouldn't run. I'd be the happiest man on earth. A family with you? That's the dream. His words were a soothing balm on my frayed nerves. We talked for hours that night about the future. We talked about baby names, where we'd want to raise our kids, what kind of parents we'd be. He made it all feel so real, so possible. He made me believe that this accident, this one moment of carelessness, was fate intervening. But in the days that followed, a subtle shift occurred. It was nothing I could put my finger on, just a change in the atmosphere. He was a little quieter, a little more distant. He started working late more often, coming home after I was already in bed. He blamed it on a huge merger at his firm, a once-in-a-career project that was demanding all of his time. He was still affectionate, still told me he loved me, but there was a new tension in his shoulders, a preoccupied look in his eyes. He was physically present, but it felt like his mind was a million miles away. Then came the nausea. At first, I dismissed it as stress. Then my period, which had been regular as clockwork my entire life, was late. 1 day late, then 3, then a week. I bought a pregnancy test on my way home from work, my heart hammering in my chest. I hid it in my purse, a guilty secret. I wanted to wait for the right moment to tell David. I convinced myself that this was it. This was the reason for his distance. He was scared, just like I was. But this news, this confirmation of our future, would bring him back to me. It would solidify us. That was yesterday. While he was supposedly at a late-night work dinner, I took the test. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, my hands shaking, and watched as those 2 pink lines bloomed into existence. A wave of emotions washed over me, terror, shock, and then a slow, creeping wave of pure, unadulterated joy. We were having a baby. I laughed, a giddy, tearful sound. I was going to be a mother. David was going to be a father. I imagined telling him, pictured the look of shock and then joy on his face. I decided to make it special. I went out and bought a tiny pair of white baby booties and a card that said, "Get ready for your next big adventure." I came home, my heart soaring with anticipation, ready to celebrate the beginning of our family. That's when I discovered I was alone. And that's how I found myself on the floor of the hallway, a guttural, animalistic sound of grief being ripped from my lungs, the world I had believed in for 3 months, revealed as a cheap, painted backdrop. The silence in the apartment was no longer just an absence of sound. It was an active presence, a malevolent entity mocking my stupidity. My first coherent thought was my phone. I scrambled for it, my fingers fumbling on the screen. I called him. It rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. His voice, that smooth, deep, whiskey voice, filled my ear. "Hey, you've reached David. Leave a message," I called again, and again, and again, maybe 10, 15 times. Each time the same result. Voicemail. Then I tried texting. "David, where are you? Your stuff is gone. I don't understand. Please call me. David, this isn't funny. I'm scared. What's happening? We need to talk. I have something to tell you. Something important. I'm pregnant, you asshole. I'm pregnant." The messages delivered. But no reply came. I opened his Instagram, the page full of our smiling faces, a picture of us at the Italian restaurant, a selfie from the top of a hike, a candid shot he'd taken of me sleeping. I refreshed the page. User not found. He had blocked me, or deleted his account. I checked Facebook. Same thing. It was like he had detonated a digital bomb, wiping out every trace of his existence from my life. I don't know how long I lay on the floor, but eventually, my sobs subsided into dry, shuddering heaves. There was only one person I could call. My fingers, still trembling, dialed Leah. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, what's up?" she said, her voice bright and cheerful. I opened my mouth to speak, but all that came out was a strangled gasp. "Chloe? Chloe, what's wrong? Are you okay?" Her tone shifted instantly from cheerful to laser-focused concern. "He's gone," I finally managed to choke out. "Leah, he's gone!" "What do you mean, gone? Gone to the store?" "No," I sobbed, the tears starting anew. "Gone. Everything. He took all his stuff. He's gone." There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by a string of curses that would have made a sailor blush. "I'm coming over," she said, her voice now a low, dangerous growl. "Don't move. I'll be there in 15 minutes. She arrived in 12. She didn't say, "I told you so." She didn't offer platitudes. She just walked in, took one look at my face and the empty space where his jacket should have been, and wrapped her arms around me. I collapsed into her, my whole body shaking, and I cried until I had nothing left. She led me to the couch, wrapped me in a blanket, and made me a cup of tea I had no intention of drinking. Then she sat down across from me, her expression a mixture of profound sadness for me and white-hot rage at him. "And there's more," I whispered, my voice hoarse. I nodded towards the nightstand in the bedroom. Leah walked in, and I heard her sharp intake of breath. She came back out, holding the pregnancy test in her hand like it was a live grenade. Her face was pale. "Oh, Chloe," she whispered. The rage was gone, replaced by an ocean of empathy. She sat next to me and held me for a long time. When my shivering finally stopped, she pulled back, and the steel returned to her eyes. "Okay," she said, her voice firm. "Okay, crying is done for now. Now, we get smart. Chloe, I need you to tell me everything you actually know about him. Not the stories he told you, but the facts. Where did he work? What was the name of his firm? What were his friends' names? Did you ever see his driver's license? A piece of mail?" I stared at her, my mind a foggy mess. I tried to grasp onto concrete details, but they were slippery, like trying to catch smoke. "He worked at Sterling Thorne Investments," I said slowly. "Downtown. He introduced me to a few friends, a guy named Dave and his wife, Jennifer." "And his family? The cousin in Chicago?" "I never met them," I admitted, a fresh wave of shame washing over me. "He said his mother lived in Florida and his grandmother was in a home. He said his family was complicated." "His life was complicated, all right," Leah muttered, pulling out her laptop. "Sterling Thorne Investments. Let's start there." She typed furiously for a few minutes, her brow furrowed. "That's weird," she said. "There's a Sterling and Thorne Financial Group, but no Sterling Thorne Investments. And their office isn't downtown. It's out by the airport." She found their corporate directory. There was no David, not a David anything. "Maybe he lied about the name of the firm?" I offered weakly. "Maybe," Leah said, her voice tight. "Let's try the friends, Dave and Jennifer. What are their last names?" I racked my brain. I don't know. He just called them Dave and Jen. We met them for drinks once. They talked about their trip to Bali." Leah's fingers flew across the keyboard again, a grim expression on her face. "Chloe, look at this." She turned the laptop towards me. She had searched for David Sterling and Thorne and found a link to a private forum. The title of the post was, "Does this man look familiar? Beware." And there he was, a picture of him, smiling that same charming smile, taken by another woman in another life. The post was from a woman in Seattle. She told a story that was eerily, terrifyingly familiar. A whirlwind romance. A passionate, attentive man who said all the right things. A sudden, unexplained disappearance. I clicked on the thread. There were replies, dozens of them. From women in Portland, Denver, Austin, San Diego. Each one had a different name for him. To one, he was David, a freelance architect. To another, he was James, a software developer. But the story was always the same. The intense love bombing, the talk of a future, the carefully curated details of a tragic past, and then the vanishing act. He would stay for a few months, embed himself in their lives, and then, like a phantom, he would disappear, often leaving a trail of emotional and sometimes financial devastation. I felt the blood drain from my face. My stomach churned. The man I had loved, the man I had mourned for the last 12 hours, had never existed. He was a construct, a fiction, a predator who fed on hope. One comment near the bottom of the thread made me stop breathing. It was from a woman in Phoenix, dated 6 months ago. He left me the day after I told him I was pregnant. I was so stupid. I thought it would make him happy. He just disappeared. I haven't heard from him since. My daughter was born 2 months ago. She has his eyes. I let out a sound, a thin, wounded whimper. It wasn't just me. He did this. This was his pattern. He created these perfect fantasies, and when the reality of commitment or consequence, a child, became too real, he simply moved on to the next town, the next identity, the next victim. The bastard, Leah breathed, her hand tightening into a fist. He's a serial heartbreaker, a professional ghost. All the vague details suddenly clicked into place. The family emergency in Chicago, the generic, non-specific friends, his lack of any real online presence, his aversion to pictures unless he was controlling the narrative. It had all been part of the act. A carefully constructed illusion. The man I had cried for, the man whose child was now growing inside of me, was a complete stranger. A monster wearing a handsome mask. The grief I had been feeling curdled into something else. Something hot and hard and sharp. Rage. A pure, unadulterated fury that burned away the tears. He didn't just break my heart. He violated my trust, my life, my future. He played a game with my emotions and left me to deal with the lifelong consequences. For the next few days, Leah and I became detectives. We pieced together everything we could from the forum. We found his real name from a woman who had managed to get a picture of his license plate before he vanished. His name was Michael Turner, and he had a record. Not for anything violent, but for petty fraud and scams in several states. He was a grifter, but his currency wasn't money. It was devotion. Armed with his real name, we found his real, heavily private social media. And through it, we found her, his wife. He wasn't just a serial dater, he was married. He lived in a suburb 2 states away with a wife and 2 young children. The dates of his business trips on his wife's cheerful Facebook page lined up perfectly with the timelines of the women on the forum. His family emergency in Chicago was a family vacation to Disney World. My David, the financial analyst who loved Russian literature, was Michael Turner, a bored suburban husband who got his kicks by playing house with unsuspecting women. The rage solidified into a cold, hard resolve. He was not going to get away with this, not completely. He thought he could erase me, but he had left a part of himself behind, a part that was now a tiny, flickering heartbeat inside me. I wouldn't beg him to come back. I wouldn't ask him for a thing. But he needed to know. He needed to know that he hadn't won. With Leah's help, I wrote him a letter. We sent it not to the ghost, but to the real man, Michael Turner, at his real address. We didn't use a return address. The letter was short. Michael, you knew me as Chloe. I'm sure it's hard to keep track. I know who you are. I know where you live. I know about your wife and your children. I know about the women in Seattle and Denver and Phoenix. You came into my life like a dream and you left like a coward. You took my trust and you shredded it. But you left something behind. I'm pregnant. And unlike you, I don't run from my responsibilities. I don't want your money. I don't want your help. I certainly don't want you. I want you to know that every time you look at your children, you will think of this one. The one you abandoned. The one who will grow up knowing that their mother was strong enough to do it all on her own, and that their father was nothing more than a ghost, a cheap story told by a pathetic man. You didn't break me. You have no idea what you've created. We sent the letter, and I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. He never replied. I didn't expect him to. His silence was his confession. The months that followed were hard. There were days I would break down, mourning a man who never was. There were days I was so filled with rage I felt like I would explode. But with every passing day, with every flutter and kick from within my growing belly, the grief and anger began to fade, replaced by something far more powerful. A fierce, primal love for the tiny person I was about to bring into the world. My apartment, which once felt haunted by his memory, was transformed. Leah helped me paint the spare room a soft, sunny yellow. We assembled a crib, laughing and cursing at the confusing instructions. We filled it with books and soft toys. The ghosts were exorcised, replaced by the promise of a new life. My relationship with Leah, once strained by my blind devotion to David, became the bedrock of my existence. She was my coach, my confidant, my fiercest protector. She held my hand at every doctor's appointment and held my hair back during the worst of the morning sickness. She was the one who was truly in it together with me. I'm 9 months pregnant now, due any day. I'm sitting in the nursery, my hand resting on my huge belly, feeling my daughter kick. The room is filled with late afternoon sunlight, and for the first time in a long time, my future doesn't feel scary. It feels hopeful. I think about the man I knew as David sometimes. I don't feel anger anymore, or even sadness. I just feel a strange, distant pity for him. He spends his life building sandcastles, only to run away when the tide comes in. He'll never know the profound, life-altering joy of watching those castles become real. He'll never know the strength it takes to face the tide. He ghosted me after I told him I was pregnant. He thought he was leaving me with a burden, a problem, a secret. He thought he was erasing me, but he was wrong. He didn't leave me with a ghost. He left me with a miracle. He left me with my daughter, and she is the most real thing in my world. He didn't end my story. He was just a dark, twisted preface to the best chapter of my life, and I'm the one who gets to write it.